Now, as part of the data analysis, we did an overview of the top 10 vulnerability that is either more exploited, more critical, or more exploited at scale. Now, the popularity concept, again, we can see some pattern around. It's interesting to see that the top critical vulnerability are actually Oracle, Apache, Debian, while the more exploited vulnerability from EPSS perspective and in terms of number of exploit available at scale is actually Microsoft. So if you already take criticality as an element to actually decide if a vulnerability is exploitable or not, you're already too late. And you're already doing something wrong because you're focusing on the wrong vulnerability that people are not looking at versus you missing the vulnerability that people are looking at. Oracle and Log4j is popular and kind of across the board available throughout. Apache, Struts, Debian vulnerability, these all come from the amount of installation. And we're going to see this number actually reconfirmed from who is targeting this vulnerability at scale from a ransomware perspective. And I have one of my favorite sentences that is, not all the critical are critical and not all the source are actually good source of information. So we're going to see and compare here in the next section, source of vulnerability information. I'm going to go a little bit faster. So on the left, we're going to see the analysis from GitHub NVD database. And on the right, we're going to see the CISA-KEV and EPSS and compare the two datasets. If we see the first dataset that is just criticality, again, Oracle, Apache, Debian, Microsoft, those are performing well, while in CISA-KEV, in terms of number of vulnerabilities that are actually actively that have an active exploit at scale, we can see Microsoft jumping very high up in the score, Adobe, Apple. So there is a big discrepancy between choosing just the critical vulnerability or looking at the vulnerability that are actually being confirmed to have an exploit. And all of these links will be available in the PDF and in the website, so you can actually play with this data set and see and dig a little bit more into these data sets. Now, the popularity of an exploitation, we can see the numbers of link available throughout several platforms. Microsoft, Oracle with Log4j, Debian, Apache, Red Hat, the top exploited operating system are actually the one that have the majority of vulnerability at scale across various data sets. And then if we take high EPSS and the previous data sets, we can see that out of all the GitHub exploit available, just a fraction of them are actually available and actually exploited in the wild. And if we take the same information around EPSS and CISA-KEV, we can see again a fraction, a very finite number of those are available. The reason why we take EPSS above 0.6 or 0.7 is because those are the factors that we consider to have the vulnerability more exploited at scale. And then we have a certain division above basically the 0.7, where the majority of EPSS are at. But is even a further refinement of all the vulnerability available. And if you can see, a lot of the vulnerability, up to 94%, are scoring a value that is 0.1 or 1% or 0.1 or 1% of likelihood of exploitation in the wild. So this enables us to really focus on the vulnerability that actually really matters. Now, CISA-KEV also has published a top routinely exploited vulnerability. I'm going to go a little bit faster on this element, where we can see the top 12 vulnerability exploited in the wild at scale. And you can see, again, these data sets available. Recently, CISA-KEV has also crossed two projects together that is basically the number of vulnerability exploited between the CISA-KEV entry and used by ransomware. And again, in here, we don't see a lot of surprises. So Microsoft is the one that has the biggest attack surface overall, hence why they're being targeted by the exploit. Now, I want to rephrase and I want to refresh the concept that a lot of this information can be automated and can become the probability of exploitation together with location that enables you to focus on the 0.1% or even less if you consider business location, business context, and location that leads you to a 0.01% of the total number of vulnerabilities that you have to consider. So, to wrap it up, the data set to consider are APSS for the probability of exploitation, CTI against a bit more refined CTI to actually look at the likelihood of exploitation, element that I use in ransomware from the CISAKF database, location of an asset for the likelihood of exploitation, and the reachability from network, as well as the type of vulnerability. Now, how easy is to deploy an exploit? The element you should consider is the popularity of an exploit. So how widespread is that exploit? How likely and how many times are actually is this exploit used at scale? If it's widely available, if it's been verified, or if there is a module that actually for this particular exploit to be deployed, and again, exploit being used in the wild, leveraging EPSS or your CTI data. And you can see the various modules. We did also an analysis on the top 12 and the methodology of attack from the top vulnerability exploited last year. And as you can see, remote code execution is the one that is most used because logically, those vulnerabilities are easier to implement and easy to weaponize at scale, either if you use ransomware or if you do specific targeted attack.